Imagine letting your 5-year-old son chase snowflakes in the front yard on a quiet Saturday morning, only to discover 20 minutes later that the world has swallowed him whole. No scream, no footprint leading into the woods, no tire tracks, no ransom note, just silence where laughter used to live. That single moment in Maple Hollow, Minnesota, fractured time for Ethan and Claire Coulter. The town itself, population 2,000, nestled between pine forests and frozen lakes, had always worn its safety like a badge of honor. Doors stayed unlocked, children roamed freely, neighbors waved without suspicion. It was the kind of place where "it can't happen here" felt like common sense rather than denial. Ethan Coulter, a former part-time dog breeder turned handyman, had promised himself he would check on Joshua in 20 minutes. He didn't. A phone call about a delayed delivery stretched into 35. When he finally stepped onto the porch, the snow was pristine except for the small, joyful chaos of Joshua's boot prints circling the yard, and then nothing. The trail simply stopped, as though the boy had been lifted straight into the sky. Claire found Ethan frozen on the steps, staring at the empty, white expanse. She dropped the laundry basket, ceramic mugs shattered like small bombs. Within hours, the entire town mobilized. Volunteers on snowmobiles, divers breaking lake ice, bloodhounds sniffing uselessly at the same dead-end scent. Helicopters thumped overhead for days. National news crews arrived, then left when no body surfaced and no credible lead emerged. 8 years passed like a slow bleed. Ethan turned the dining room into a war room of police reports, age-progressed sketches, and faded reward posters. Claire cleaned obsessively, not out of vanity, but because motion kept despair at bay. They spoke Joshua's name every day so it wouldn't fade from their tongues. Grief counselors warned them about complicated bereavement, the limbo of ambiguous loss where hope and hopelessness fight to the death. Ethan learned the term ambiguous loss, a psychological wound without closure, and hated how perfectly it described their life. Neighbors stopped asking any news because the question itself became cruel. Harold Stevens, the reclusive widower across the street, never asked at all. After losing his own wife and teenage son to a violent home invasion 10 years earlier, Harold had withdrawn into silence, so deep it almost felt respectful. He nodded when they passed, repaired their fence once without being asked, then vanished back into his peeling 2-story house. Yet ordinary life crept forward in cruel increments. Ethan fixed other people's roofs while his own family remained broken. Claire started a small online support group for parents of missing children, typing late into the night so strangers across continents would know they weren't alone. They both aged visibly, gray threading through Ethan's beard, permanent shadows under Claire's eyes, but neither would admit defeat. Philosophers from Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor who wrote Man's Search for Meaning, to modern trauma researchers agree. The greatest human strength is not avoiding suffering, but finding meaning inside it. Ethan and Claire clung to that idea like a rope in a blizzard. They refused to let Joshua become only a tragedy. He remained their son, alive in memory, perhaps alive in reality. One winter morning, 8 years to the week after the disappearance, a snowstorm toppled their aging fence onto Harold's property again. Harold appeared on their porch, not to complain, but to say he had already patched it. Ethan felt a flicker of gratitude, mixed with awkwardness. Claire, ever the one reaching for connection, suggested inviting Harold to dinner. "We've all lost family," she said quietly. "Maybe shared sorrow can build something new." Ethan hesitated. Social rituals felt like betrayal of their endless search. But he crossed the street anyway, knocked, heard hammering from the backyard, and found Harold crouched inside an ancient dog kennel that had stood empty since his old German shepherd Rex died years earlier. Harold emerged looking winded, strangely protective of the small structure. He claimed he was building a larger kennel because he planned to get a new dog. Ethan, drawing on his old breeding days, offered to help and even take Harold to a local breeder. For the first time in a decade, Harold agreed. Something in the air shifted, subtle as the first crack in lake ice before spring. But when Ethan later saw Harold drive alone to that very breeder, after canceling their joint trip with an excuse about meeting friends, unease settled like frost in his lungs. Why lie about something so small? Grief makes people strange, he told himself. Yet the question lingered. What if the strangeness is not grief at all, but camouflage? And so the first thread of truth began to pull loose from the fabric of ordinary neighborly politeness. Reflection. How often do we dismiss small inconsistencies in people we think we know, because confronting them would force us to question them? Harold Stevens had spent 10 years constructing solitude the way an engineer builds a dam, methodically, deliberately, leak-proof. After the home invasion that stole his wife and son, he stopped attending town meetings, declined dinner invitations, let paint peel and snow pile. Most people interpreted it as mourning. A few whispered survivor's guilt. Almost no one suspected architecture. The old dog kennel in his backyard had become a shrine to Rex, or so everyone assumed. No one noticed that its floor sat slightly higher than logic demanded, or that the concrete pad beneath it had been quietly excavated over years of long winter nights. The German Shepherd puppy arrived too fast, paperwork too quick, transaction too smooth. Ethan watched from his kitchen window as Harold wrestled the metal travel crate through deep snow. When Ethan crossed the street offering help, Harold snapped, "I'm fine," with a sharpness that felt like a slap. Later, at dinner, Harold's fork trembled when Ethan casually mentioned seeing him at Northwood's kennels alone. "My friend canceled," Harold explained. "I was excited, went ahead." Reasonable, perhaps. But Ethan's breeder instincts flared. Legitimate puppy purchases rarely move that fast unless cash changes hands under the table, or unless someone has a long-standing relationship with the seller. Harold claimed he had ordered the dog days earlier, yet that morning he hadn't even decided on breed or size. Another small crack. As snow thickened outside, Harold abruptly left dinner to check on the dog, forgetting his coat in his haste. He did not return. After 40 minutes, Ethan carried the coat across the street. No answer at the door. Barking from the backyard. The new German Shepherd paced restlessly, lunging toward the old kennel rather than away from Ethan. When Ethan moved the chain, the dog quieted, almost gratefully. Kneeling, he saw it, a wooden panel in the kennel floor, padlock open, metal handle glinting like a secret tooth. A trapdoor. Not a child's play fort. Not a storm shelter. A purpose-built entrance to something hidden. Harold emerged from below moments later, dust on his sleeves, pupils wide with shock. "What are you doing here?" he asked, voice too calm. Ethan held up the coat like evidence. Harold took it slowly. Then the mask slipped. Harold lunged. They fought in the snow. Two grieving men turned animals until sirens arrived. Police separated them. An officer shone a light down the opening. Metal stairs descended into darkness. Then footsteps climbed upward. Not Harold's. Smaller. Hesitant. A boy appeared, 13, pale, red-haired, clutching Harold's handgun. "Dad," he said to Harold, "I won't let the enemy catch you." Ethan's knees buckled. The face, older, thinner, but unmistakable. Joshua. 8 years had stretched the boy into adolescence, yet the cheekbones, the eyes, the stubborn set of the mouth belonged to the child who once chased snowflakes across their lawn. Harold stared at the ground. Joshua looked between strangers, and the only parent he remembered. Confusion fractured into terror. Claire showed him an old photo on her phone, 5-year-old Joshua grinning in a red snowsuit. The boy's hand shook, the gun wavered. An officer gently disarmed him. Paramedics wrapped him in blankets. Claire followed the stretcher, whispering, "We never stopped looking." Harold's journals, later recovered from the bunker, revealed a mind broken by loss and rebuilt around delusion. He had taken Joshua the day the boy vanished, not randomly, but because the child's red hair reminded him of his dead son. He told Joshua the surface world was at war, that above-ground people were enemies, that the bunker was the only safe place. He schooled him in survival, taught him to shoot, fed him lies instead of sunlight. The new dog was never meant as a pet. It was insurance, another layer of security once Joshua grew strong enough to question. Idiom Spotlight. The mask slipped equals someone's true feelings or intentions accidentally showed after being carefully hidden. Reflection. Deception requires constant maintenance. Truth needs only one moment of courage. Which one are you building in your own life right now? Joshua had no memory of snow as play. To him, snow was camouflage, something to be feared because it marked movement. He had not seen sunlight unfiltered for 8 years. Vitamin D deficiency had softened his bones. Limited exercise had weakened muscles, yet Harold had fed him regularly, taught him reading from old encyclopedias, drilled him in military discipline. The bunker, stocked with MREs, air filters, a chemical toilet, solar-charged batteries, was a makeshift. It was obsessive preparation turned prison. In the hospital, Joshua asked simple, shattering questions. Is the war really over? Why did Dad lie? Do I still have a mother? Each sentence peeled another layer from the fiction Harold had wrapped around him. Therapists explained Stockholm Syndrome, emotional bonding with a captor, and disenfranchised grief, mourning a relationship society doesn't recognize. In this case, Joshua grieving the father he was losing. He cried for Harold, not out of love, but out of habit. Habit is the strongest chain. Ethan and Claire sat with him daily, bringing photo albums, telling stories. How Joshua once hid under the kitchen table during thunderstorms, how he named every stuffed animal with heroic titles. Joshua listened politely, like a guest in someone else's memory. Recognition came slowly, not in a Hollywood flash, but in fragments. The smell of Claire's apple pie triggered a bodily memory before conscious recall. Ethan's low laugh made Joshua flinch, then relax, then smile uncertainly. Modern relevance. Today's children grow up in digital bunkers, echo chambers, curated feeds, fear-driven algorithms that tell them the world is ending daily. Joshua's story literalizes what many teens experience figuratively. Years spent underground in someone else's narrative, emerging unsure what is real. English learners note the phrase "come to light," become known after being hidden. The truth about Joshua came to light only when one small lie, the fence, led to another, the dog, led to the trapdoor. Philosophical thread. Epictetus, the ancient Stoic, taught that we cannot control what happens to us, only how we interpret it. Joshua had to reinterpret his entire childhood. That act of reauthoring is perhaps the deepest human freedom. Reflection. What story have you accepted about yourself that someone else wrote, and are you ready to rewrite even one sentence? Harold was charged with kidnapping, false imprisonment, child endangerment, assault with a deadly weapon, and weapons offenses. He never denied the facts, only offered fragmented explanations. I wanted a family again. I saved him from a dangerous world. Psychiatrists diagnosed delusional disorder compounded by unresolved PTSD. The court showed no leniency. Yet Ethan and Claire did not demand vengeance. They asked the judge for mental health treatment alongside incarceration. He stole 8 years. Ethan sat outside the courthouse, but hate would steal more. Forgiveness here was not erasure. It was refusal to let Harold define their future. Claire later wrote in her support group newsletter, "Forgiving doesn't mean trusting again. It means refusing to carry poison in your own heart." Advanced vocabulary, magnanimity, generosity of spirit, especially toward an enemy. Few display it under such circumstances. Maple Hollow changed. Parents watched children more closely, not from paranoia, but from awakened responsibility. The town erected a small memorial playground where Joshua once played, named Snowprint Park. Joshua himself, now attending therapy and catching up on school, sometimes visited it, reclaiming space rather than avoiding it. Modern parallel. Restorative justice movements worldwide argue that punishment alone rarely heals. Dialogue and accountability sometimes do. Joshua never spoke to Harold again, but he wrote one letter, never sent. "You told me the world was war. You were wrong, but you also kept me alive. I hate what you did, and I'm still afraid of the dark sometimes. I don't forgive you yet. Maybe someday." That sentence, honest, unfinished, is more powerful than easy absolution. Reflection. Can you hold two truths at once? Someone hurt you deeply, and you still wish healing for them? That tension is where real maturity lives. Joshua turned 14 above ground. He learned to ride a bike in spring, tasted ice cream in summer, watched fireworks without thinking they were enemy flares. Nightmares still came, claustrophobia in elevators, panic at sudden loud noises, but each year they arrived less frequently. He grew tall like Ethan, inherited Claire's quiet humor. School was hard, peers didn't know how to talk to the bunker boy. Yet some did, quietly, without pity. One friend taught him video games, another showed him constellations through a telescope. Normalcy arrived in fragments, like light through blinds. Ethan and Claire aged into different people, not healed, but transformed. They spoke publicly, not for fame, but to remind others. Missing children are not statistics. They are sons, daughters, futures interrupted. Their marriage survived, not despite the trauma, but because they learned to grieve together instead of beside each other. Universal wisdom. Resilience is not the absence of pain. It is the decision to keep walking toward light even when the tunnel feels endless. Joshua's story teaches English learners the power of perseverance, continued effort despite difficulty, and redemption, finding goodness or purpose after failure or suffering. Not just for the kidnapped, but for the parents, the town, even the kidnapper who lost himself long before he stole a child. 8 years underground. 8 years searching, a lifetime of rebuilding. Maple Hollow still has brutal winters, but the Coulters no longer fear snow. It is simply weather now, and Joshua sometimes plays in it, laughing as flakes catch in his hair, proving that even the coldest silence can eventually thaw. Final message: time cannot be recovered, but love can be relearned, trust can be rebuilt, and every human being, no matter how deep the darkness they've lived in, deserves the chance to stand under open sky again. What part of your own life is still waiting to come above ground, and what small step will you take today to open the trapdoor?